Welcome to Beyond the Surface. We highlight underrepresented voices in architecture and humanize architects by discovering who they are beyond the surface. Hi, I'm your host, Alex Sanchez, representing the Illinois Tech student chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects. Today's episode is called Breaking Barriers, Paving Futures, with our guest, Jen Park. Park is an award-winning architect, professor, mother, and co-founder and principal of Park Fowler Plus. She won the AIA Chicago 2019 Dubin Family Young Architect Award and the AIA National Young Architects Award in 2021. Along with personal recognition, her work with Brindlestone Niche was recognized when the firm won AIA Chicago Firm of the Year in 2019. Jen is a professor and coordinator for the second-year undergraduate studio at Illinois Tech. She is one of the founding members of the AIA Chicago Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, where she served as co-chair for 4 years. She is currently the co-chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee at the Illinois Tech's College of Architecture. Thank you so much for being here with us today. How are you feeling?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. It's very exciting.
I'm so glad that you have taken your time and energy to be here. I know how busy you are, so thank you for that.
No problem.
So let's get started. I'm going to ask a question more about how you identify yourself. You grew up in the Midwest. Can you tell us about how that influenced who you are?
Yeah, so I grew up in Wisconsin. My parents were first generation. They immigrated from Korea. And they first, I guess, established themselves where I was born was Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And I lived there until I was in second grade and then moved to Waukesha, Wisconsin. So, and then from there, I moved out of Wisconsin to go to college. But I think the Midwest is, they're very influential on my life. I think from kind of American Midwest values that were instilled in me, those being something like working hard and just like being rooted in family. I think looking back at the Midwest, growing up there for me was a little bit different than I think it is now even. I think the demographics were different then. The acceptance for minorities was different. I can certainly tell not pleasant stories about growing up as somebody different. And I think that certainly shaped who I became or who I am now. It gives you some resilience, thick skin in many ways, but also I think just teaches you what's really important, how to be strong and kind of true to yourself.
When would you say you started to know or feel like you were different?
Probably very early on. And it's more from other people telling me I was different. The good old school ground, playground kind of atmosphere. There weren't people that looked different, right? That were Asian in that area that much. I mean, I was probably one of in my class, you know. Even in high school, with a few hundreds, right? There was maybe one other Asian in my class. The thing is, though, I tell people this, that when I grew up there, I didn't think that I was different. I saw myself as quote-unquote white. I saw myself as one of everybody else. I was only reminded of that when other people told me or made fun of me or something like that, or just pointed out the differences or wanted to make light of something. Maybe it was because I don't know if I felt the need to fit in, but sometimes that was part of it. I didn't see myself as different superficially as they did.
I understand. I mean, growing up as well, I grew up in Las Vegas, so it's such a mixed culture there. And I didn't know I was like black or Mexican. I always thought, well, my mom's lighter skin, she's probably white. My dad's darker skin, he's probably black. But it doesn't even matter because everyone speaks Spanish in their houses, right? So it takes a while to like understand differences or that you're different. But I feel like it's also has to do with this country. This country really builds like that divide to make you feel different.
It's funny, can I tell one story now that I'm thinking about it? You said when I maybe first realized. When I was maybe, I don't know, 5 or something, running around with kids on my block in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And it's kind of a mix of like what I remember and what my mom remembers. But the way I tell it is that we were all in my backyard, and all the kids in our block, we'd like gather around. We'd always like knock on our house, our doors, yell at our moms to give us popsicles, right, on a hot summer day. Mom, do we have popsicles, right? And this one time my mom was like, no, we don't have popsicles, but we have subak. And so I go out, and subak, the Korean word for watermelon, I go out and tell all of my friends. It's like, oh, my mom has subak. They were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, subak, subak. And they're like, no, that makes no sense. What are you talking about? And my mom brings out watermelon, right? And everybody was like, you mean watermelon? And I was like, that's what I said, subak. And I think maybe that was my earliest memory of like realizing, wow, our languages not in sync. What my, Konglish, my mixed, English and Korean wasn't jiving with everybody else's, household languages. But yeah, I think my mom loves that story. It's hilarious.
That's such a funny story. So, going as a kid, when did you feel like you started becoming interested in architecture?
For me, I loved art. And I'd always drawn and painted, attended a lot of art classes and summer camps and things like that. My neighbor was my high school art teacher, and he at one time, and I had taken like summer courses because he was teaching summer stuff like at the high school there. But I think it was pretty early on in high school, he mentioned, hey, have you explored architecture? And I was like, what is architecture? I had no concept of like the word, the term. And he's like, well, you're good at art, but you're also good at math and science, right? So I said, yeah. And he said, maybe you should check out this program at the Milwaukee School of Engineering. They had like a summer course. And I think it was then that I dabbled in a first architecture studio, but it was very light, to say the least. We made some, I think what I remember is we made a version of a museum or a gallery or something like that, and I was cutting up foam core, and I thought it was awesome because like it was this 3-dimensional version of visualizing like space and qualities of space and imagining myself in this creation.
How old were you?
I think it was freshman or sophomore year in high school. So I never really, prior to that, imagined. I thought I was going to be an artist, I think. And then high school, I did have an internship, so that also helped expose me to the kind of professional side. And it was a friend's father who had a small architecture firm in Waukesha, Wisconsin. And they had an office inside an old bank, which had this beautiful rotunda in a big bank vault, and they kept all their blueprints in there, which is kind of crazy. But I learned to render by hand and draw by hand and draft. You guys know all that's the drafting tables that we don't use anymore. But it was so fun to visualize and be able to draw and be creative, and that kind of propelled me. And I kept pursuing that and pursued it in college and thereon.
So you grew up in the suburbs of Milwaukee, but you ended up going to school in Columbia University, which is a big change from the Midwest. Can you talk about your experiences in New York City?
Yeah, no, it was drastically different. But I really felt that there was more outside of the Midwest that I needed to explore. It's kind of been a bit of my trajectory to kind of not be afraid of going somewhere else, trying something new. And I think my first foray at that was really to take that step to study at Columbia in New York. And I can say that it was a super shock to the system the first days that I arrived there. And I, couldn't get used to how much noise the city, from coming from like the suburbs of Wisconsin, which is super quiet and Maybe the loudest thing was occasional like railroad train passing by or something off in the distance, to constant traffic and horns and sirens, right, in the city. So yeah, I feel like I didn't sleep for a month. And then just like the buzz of the city, just kind of constant motions, people always around you, always, there's always something going on. And I mean, after living there and studying there, I certainly grew to love it. And I grew to love the density of things. I grew to love all the activity, the resources, the access to things, the ability to travel around so easily without a car. Those things were great. There was so much so close by that you could access. And the diversity of people was shocking too.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up from being one of two Asians in high school to being like, where did all these Asians come from? Where were they hiding? Are you kidding me? And to be invited to like the KSA, the Korean Student Organization or something like that. And just like, I was the oddity in that sense because they grew up in Jersey or in California, LA area or something with more Asians around them. And I didn't. So I actually felt a fish out of water there, even though I looked like them. My background was different. And I dabbled in that, but it wasn't, I also kept my foot in other waters too. But those things were definitely the biggest shock. But then again, like you grow to love it. I remember going back to friends in Wisconsin, relaying the stories, and you wouldn't believe why all this stuff, and they have all these Asians there, and there, you know. So, yeah. Once I really delved in and just absorbed it all, I just felt like I loved that kind of city dynamic.
That sounds pretty cool, going from, oh, I don't see that many people that look like me, to, oh my God, a lot of people look like me. So that must have been a huge shock, but did it feel nice or?
I think it was, like I said, a little bit awkward at first because people would gravitate towards me, other Koreans, other Asians, or things like that, thinking we had like backgrounds and like that shared community. And we, I mean, there's a lot of my background and family background that was shared, but I didn't grow up with a whole posse of Koreans around me in school or anything like that. So I think it was nice to be able to share more commonalities with people more openly and have them accept it, right? That was nice because otherwise, I guess, growing up without having more Asians or Koreans around, there's only so much that you can share that they want to understand. In Wisconsin, we did have like a Korean church community, but you only see them every once in a while. So it was nice. It was different to be surrounded by so much diversity. I mean, I also learned not just about my Asian culture and like having a community of Asians around me, but like other diversity of people, Black, brown, and different religions and different just ethnicities. I learned so much. I was so naive in many ways going into such a big city that had so many people from so many different backgrounds. So it was really enriching in that way. Mm-hmm.
You ended up going to a 4-year undergraduate college. What did you end up majoring in?
Yeah, so Columbia didn't have a 5-year BArch program like Illinois Tech does. Instead, you get a BA, a Bachelor's of Arts, and you can major in architecture, but then you would also have to specialize or minor, basically, in another degree or another field. So I majored in architecture and minored in art history, and those two complemented me and my background because I was very interested in art, and I think that was, for me, a great background and groundings for things. But because of that, if I wanted to continue to pursue architecture, I chose to go and get a master's degree in architecture.
And for your master's, you went against conventional standards to going to an Ivy League school for your graduate degree. Can you explain your decision and how that would guide your path in architecture?
Yeah, I mean, that was a very conscious decision, definitely. I certainly could have stayed in the East Coast. I could have stayed at another Ivy. I could have stayed at Columbia. But for me, something I mentioned before, it was important for me to get exposure. I've been realizing that the best way to get exposure is just be out there, go experience it yourself. And I had never really explored the West Coast. I thought, why not learn about architecture on the West Side? Because the education that you get in your kind of local region is it's very embedded in the local. East Coast is embedded in its East Coast, Midwest. You learn the roots of that area. And I had yet to learn about the West Coast and the way in which they think about design and their history of design. And so that was a big part. I also followed professors that I thought were interesting, and educators and architects. So at the time, I was following Greg Lynn, I was following Sylvia Lavin, I was following Neil Denari, and they were all teaching on the West Coast. I was following Tom Main at Morphosis, like those people, they were all teaching on the West Coast. And I wanted to learn from them and be on that side to understand how they practice and how they think about things. And yeah, LA and New York are two major cities, but couldn't be more different, honestly. I learned a lot from that environment, but ultimately, like, I think the LA atmosphere wasn't my cup of tea, and so I did end up moving back to New York. Maybe some people say that, like, if you start in one major city like New York and then you go to another place, you like New York better. And then other people, like those that start in LA and then go to New York, then like LA better. At least it seems like that was a trend for folks coming from the Midwest like myself that I would meet on both sides. So for me, I like New York.
I get that. I mean, for me, I like Seattle. Seattle's beautiful. That was my first like major city. Even after coming to Chicago, my heart's in Seattle.
Ah,
So,
you can
yep.
deal with the raininess and
It's
grayness.
okay. I can deal with the raininess if I have like, well, there's a lot of lakes out there. There's a lot of mountains. I love mountains and trees, so I can deal with it if it's for that.
Yeah.
So how'd you end up here in Chicago?
So how did I get to Chicago?
Yes.
Well, I went back to New York, and I worked there for an architecture firm, architecture research office. I loved it. Thought it was great. I think at some point after a few years there, the city, like I said, people are very busy. It can be a bit draining, and I think I was maybe a little bit burned out at that time. I wanted to see more again. So I ended up moving to Virginia, and I was actually at the time, well, I had met my husband, and so we both decided we were going to move to Virginia and spend some time in Richmond there, and I started teaching down there and started working down there. And the thought really being, if I'm being honest, like New York, there was a lot of building stock there. There's a lot of old building stock. There's a lot of like renovations. There's a lot of adaptive reuse, as you would say now, which is great. But I was feeling this need to like really understand building from like the ground up and to just challenge myself in a different environment. So part of that move to Virginia was in the kind of ideas to seek some of that out. Now, I don't know, that maybe I found a little bit of that, but it was a trade-off because I moved from a big city to a small city. And while I love the people there, met great creative people out there, it was a little bit too small at the end. So from there, that was like the time when the economy crashed, 2007, 2008. Everybody was moving out of the big cities.
Yeah.
Nobody was moving back in. So we just basically hung out. And we're like, well, we're just going to make the most of it in good old Richmond, Virginia. And we did. We stayed there for like 3 years and then decided that it was time to move back to a bigger city. And for us, it was debate about whether we moved to New York or Chicago. And at that time, it was important for us to be closer to our family. So Chicago was the winner.
Once you were in Chicago, how did your career change?
Yeah, so I came, it was still a bit of a down economy when I came. So it was really hard to find anything. Nobody was really hiring. But I did find an office. At the time, it was called Wilkinson Blender, and they were 2 partners. And I enjoyed the work that they were doing. And I joined their office, which I loved the scale of things. The size of the office was maybe like 6 or 7 people at the time. And they, as partners, decided after a few years of myself being there, they decided they would split. So I finished out the projects that I was working on. And at that point in time, when I was on a new job hunt, I decided I had never tried a corporate office, a bigger office. And so after interviewing different places, I decided to try Gensler in Chicago. And that was a very big office. And to me, it was like, why not? I had tried other versions. I know what I was comfortable in, and I enjoyed my experience in smaller, mid-sized offices. But my time at Gensler was big office, and it was great in many ways. Again, people were great. I worked on a headquarters project out in the Midwest, had a nice team with me, but in the end, it wasn't really my cup of tea, and so I spun off and started my own practice with a partner. Our practice got bought out by another larger company, Clayco, and we became Forum, the architecture wing of Clayco. All of that, I think, were like me taking risks, knowing that like it may not be the right fit, but for me it was important to, again, try and take that leap. I think I knew in the end that I wanted to establish my own practice, and I needed to learn all the parts and pieces of it from different angles before I was going to fully dive in. So again, that was something that lasted for a little bit, and after that, I chose to open up Jurassic Studio. That was my own practice. I wanted it to be of me, my kind of personality, my experience, my intuitions, my kind of creative vision for our urban environments and the spaces that we create. So I grew that to a certain degree, and at some point in time, I was talking to a lot of mentors about where to take the practice and what my next steps would be. And one of those mentors was Brad Lynch. And we had conversations about where I would go, where his practice is going. And Brad Lynch is the Lynch of Brinstool Lynch, long-established practice in Chicago, an award-winning practice. And yeah, our conversations kind of led to thinking about me coming on board at Brinstool Lynch as a partner and kind of marrying our 2 sides of things to be, for me to help them in the succession of Brinstool Lynch.
I feel like when you first came to Chicago, it was like this large city to explore what you could do with your architecture work. That's what it's sounding like. You started just jumping from small firm, big firm, make my own firm. And,
yeah. I tell everybody, this is not like your typical or traditional path, but it's also not something that I would tell anybody not to do either. Mm-hmm. I think that you have to have a certain energy and ambition, certain willingness to fail to be able to do this. But the gains on the other side is like every time I learn something, I also, whether you want to call it fail or not, like I could take that experience, harness it, and grow from there, like exponentially more, right? So that was my trajectory. That was kind of the way in which I found that I could pursue what I wanted to pursue in the end of the day and make my vision for a firm and for architecture. And it's not for everybody, but I also got to say, like, it could be if you have that energy and you're interested. But I'm not talking about like jumping jobs just for the hell of jumping jobs. I'm saying figure out what you are trying to get out of it. Go deliberately into it. See whether it meets your expectations, then make a decision about whether this is right fit or not. So everything was a deliberate decision. I went into it consciously, and I knew what my potential outcomes would be.
So taking risks, experimenting, doing what you love, because no matter what, you like architecture. So
Right.
no matter where you were doing something you liked.
Right. I wanted to find pieces of things from each place, but none of those, let's say, past experience, or some of those past experience, they fell short of some of my expectations. And so I made decisions to take a new route.
So you're a professor at IIT, so when did you start teaching?
Yeah, so I started to teach actually in Virginia at Virginia Commonwealth University. And then when I moved here, when I was at Wilkinson Blender, one of the partners there was teaching, Richard Blender was teaching at IIT. And he was teaching third year. And there was a spot that opened, and I had been on some reviews, and I had expressed an interest in potentially teaching. And something opened up, and he mentioned it to me. And I think I started teaching, I don't know. I know it's been like almost 11 years, at least 11 years.
Wow.
Not all of it has been at IIT, but a good majority of it was at IIT. I started at IIT, and I started teaching in third year.
So the entire time you were experimenting with what you wanted to do with architecture, you were also teaching?
Yeah, pretty much. I was juggling both. I think it was like important. The teaching side of things was also an experiment. It was always a way in which I could challenge certain thinking and do that with students. The studio and that environment, and thinking about the challenges that we pose to you were also challenges that I posed to myself, right? So I feel like it was important I enjoy it because of that. And yeah, it was a lot to juggle. Again, I'm not a person to shy away from challenges.
So when it comes to being a professor, how do you see your teaching as a way to mentor and guide the next generation of architects?
I think that is probably the main goal of me teaching. Part of it was enriching myself and challenging myself, but really that's evolved to seeing this as the pathway for growing our field. For me to be able to contribute to that is one, it's an incredibly large task, but enriching in that way, gratifying. And I think we, as educators, that's our primary goal, is being able to kind of help shape the next generations and help do this, share stories about the challenges I've faced, the kind of help that I've gotten along the way, and then pass that all along to the future generations. And having the environment of teaching and directing in studios, it's a perfect platform.
I agree. I also feel like, in a way, you are also representing the new upcoming architects. As one of your previous students, I know in your class, it was definitely very helpful to finally see more women in architecture. And since you are also an award-winning architect, to know that women of color can also get somewhere too. There is not that many women in architecture, and there is not that many women of color in architecture either. So it was definitely very inspiring and helpful to see you every single day as a professor too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't take that charge lightly. I think it's super important that if I have success, I share that. And that if I can shed some more light, if I can be encouraging, if I can help to usher in a new generation that's more diverse, I recognize that comes with the territory. Now, with the platform that I have, whatever that may be, if I get more of a mic on me and can share to more people, then more people want to hear. I think that is the responsibility I think that I take on now, and I do it through teaching, and I recognize that it's a huge responsibility, but something that could yield so much in return.
Yeah, I agree. I know being an architect as well as a professor is a hard thing to do. So can you tell us a little bit more how Park Fowler Plus was founded?
Yeah, I started talking a little bit about my trajectory, or a lot. And when I was brought on to Bristol Lynch, I was still teaching. And we just recently went through a big transition. It was largely due to the passing of the founding partner, Brad Lynch, who is my mentor. And Brad Lynch and David Brinstool had a practice, and David Brinstool teaches here at IIT. And so we as partners, the remaining partners, David Brinstool, myself, and Brad Fowler, we had a lot to consider at that point in time. The idea was that when I came on board to Brinstool Lynch, and Brad Fowler was also elevated as a partner, that we were in the lineup to be the successors to Brinstool Lynch after David Brinstool and Brad Lynch started to retire. And a lot of the practices in Chicago of that generation grappling with the same kind of questions. And I think it was really forward thinking, actually, of Brad and David to start thinking about that as they brought myself and Brad Fowler in the fold of partnership. So when it came down to things, the fall of last year, we had to put our thing, just get together and think about, now what is the future? And with the guidance of David Brinstool, we really did talk about, okay, we want to carry out the legacy that they built, but it's also new leadership. It would be Brad Fowler and myself leading the firm. So it's also a time in which we could put ourselves out there with a new identity and be able to charge forward kind of the future of this practice. So hence the new identity, the new brand, Park Fowler Plus. And for us, the plus is probably even more meaningful than the two names there, because it really recognizes not just the composite of the firm and the makeup and the talent that we have there, but everybody else that we collaborate with in terms of clients and communities. But it also is a little bit of a nod to Brinstool Lynch, who had a plus in their name and their logo. So for us, it's full fold. The plus for us is about a forward future in architecture and what's to come, and having us contribute to the new field of our urban fabric.
That is very beautiful. Building from like the legacy that Brinstool and Lynch had, and building on the impact that you also had as a person in Brinstool and Lynch is very meaningful, and I hope it can impact future people too. So while also being a professor, an architect, you're also a mother. Can you talk about how you approach motherhood, considering the fact that you own a firm and teach?
Yeah, it's a lot to juggle. I joke about not really sleeping, and it's not really a joke. No. That is a struggle that I think working women have in general, even if it's just one job, to juggle having kids, having a family, making the right time and the right balance. I got to say, I have a lot of help. I have help from family. I have help from grandparents. I have help from babysitters, to kind of make it all happen. Really, they say it takes a village. It does. And I'm lucky that I have that support. But it's also me finding the right balance to juggle all three, also find time to sleep. But I also think about my kids and showing them that you put your mind to it, you can do it, and it takes hard work and diligence and effort. But I also want to show them that, but I also want to show them, and what I think about a lot is when I have time with them, I want to make it really good time, not fluff time. I don't want to juggle and do work and things like that in front of them. I'm dedicating my time. So I've learned that weekends are precious to me. That's my time with my family, because my weekdays I know will get crazy busy. And when I carve out time, when we have family trips, when we have events, like that's my time. And I feel like to be focused in that way, you reap a lot more benefits. And yeah, that's how I try to make it work.
It seems like you're doing pretty well. Like, I feel like not many people can balance so much at one time. I mean, as a student, we barely balance studio and work or studio and sleep. So,
Well, Alex, you know how much I harped on time management,
yes,
remember?
yes,
We talked
yes.
a lot about that time management. And I put it to practice. Make everything, the whole idea of like, with the quality time with my kids is really focused. If I am focused on teaching, I'm focused on teaching. And if I like focus on the practice, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it does take that. So the lessons that in studio about time management, I'm telling you, they hold true through your entire life. And if you are ambitious and interested in trying different things and being out there, that's a big part of making it happen.
Yeah. And all the time you spend on doing things, you end up doing it with the energy and the passion that you want to do it with.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like commit, go for it, put your full force and energy behind it, and then see whether it's working out or not. And yeah, that's kind of how I tackle it all.
So, with your experience as a practitioner and educator, where do you see the future of the architecture profession going?
Yeah, that's a very big question. So I think that I'm certainly positive about the direction of things. I think I see the generation, your generation, future generations, as super motivated in a different way than we were our generations past. I was just talking to somebody today about how I think your generation is so socially connected, and I'm not just saying like social media connected, but you're so socially aware of what's around you, of interactions, of the power of your interactions. You guys are driven in ways to motivate people to carry out values of equity and diversity in ways that our generations are just touching the surface of. And if I think about that, and I think about what you guys can do, the future of architecture, for me, I've always said this, is that diversity breeds like creativity, right? The greater diversity you have, the greater perspectives that you have at the table, the more creative output you will have. So if that's the case, and you guys have all this energy behind it, and everybody has this momentum, I think the field of architecture will be so much more creative, and we'll have so many more ideas at the table. We will be able to take more risks. We will be out there challenging certain things. We will live in environments that are accepting of a lot greater, I don't know, like, I guess we'll be able to challenge ourselves in new ways and live differently, ideally, live better, live more holistically, live being more enriched by what we have around us, and maybe in a much more symbiotic way too with the environment, the natural environment, those things that I think we currently are grappling with as well. So I don't know, I think that I think the field of architecture, our urban dynamics and environments are going to be really fun and interesting, and I think we'll see environments changing a lot more.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for what's coming for architecture. I definitely think the architects we have now are very impressive, including yourself. And they're really good people to look up to, especially since I do think that one thing that helps mostly students right now are the fact that we have more representation and more people that either looks like us or has done the things that we want to do. We're able to get out of our bubble and learn a bit more about who we are and what we can do in the future.
Absolutely. And I think that's all of that is going to shape a very different future that, again, it's just going to be filled with a lot more interesting ideas and new ways in which we can build and shape our cities and our communities.
Knowing that you have accomplished so many things, what goals do you still have for the future?
Well, we just launched Park Fowler Plus not too long ago, so I have a lot of work ahead of me growing that company and the firm, and I am very excited about it. I'm excited about how we're going to work as an office together, how we are going to do some amazing architecture, how we're going to hopefully really set an example as an office too for others to follow, that we can be great thinkers about design and architecture, but also really love and enjoy the work itself, which is comprised of like all the people and their talent, and celebrate that. And so I think I'm excited about that. I have goals for a really big dreams for Park Fowler Plus, I guess. But otherwise, I think I want to continue to share my story. I want to continue to enable other and future generations of future architects. I want to fully help contribute to the diversity of our profession. I want to enjoy time with my family and see where they're going to go and help usher them into their futures. And yeah, I think at some point in time, I want to take a vacation. No.
If you do, you deserve one. You've been working so hard, so you definitely deserve one.
Yeah, I can't wait.
No, well, I really enjoyed our conversation today. So thank you for taking the time out of your really, really busy schedule for this. Is there anything else you would like to say to the audience?
I think that what you guys are doing is incredible, and really kudos to you guys, and for all of your listeners. You guys are a lucky crew, and to have you guys leading this and starting that conversation and broadcasting it. Yeah, I'm excited for you guys, and like I said, I'm excited to see what you guys do for our futures, and I think it's very bright.
Thank you for that. Well, I want to thank everyone who is listening. We release our episodes monthly. You can find us on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts. I want to thank our producer, Caleb Kwok, and WIIT for making this podcast possible. Thank you for listening to the episode of Beyond the Surface featuring Jen Park. Until next time, goodbye.